What if I told you that everything you were told about being strong was a lie? Think about all those times when you were told to man up, to be strong, to stop crying, to not be a baby. What if those times were actually robbing us from the very most important tool that we have as human beings? Vulnerability. The very thing that we were taught to keep hidden, to fear, to suppress, is actually one of our greatest tools. It's one of our greatest strengths. Now, I get it. Some of those words could have came from a parent, a teacher, a coach, or even a friend, or someone with good intentions. But the message they say stays loud and clear, that emotions equal weakness. But do they? I want you to think of the time that you witnessed real courage. Was it someone lifting heavy weights, or was it someone standing up in front of others and sharing something real? I want to share you guys a short story that my father once told me when I was a boy. It's a quick story about a man, a water carrier. This man would bring back forth water to his village. And he had two pots. One pot was perfect, with no defect, and never spilled a drop. But the other pot had a crack along its side. And you see, what was interesting about this crack is that by the time the man got back to his village, the pot with the crack had lost half of its original water. So one day, the cracked pot said to the man, "I'm sorry, I'm weak, I'm not enough." But the man smiled and he replied to the pot, "Have you not noticed the flowers growing on your side of the path? I planted seeds and you watered them every day. You brought life and beauty in a way that the perfect pot could never." See, we are all cracked pots. And that crack on that side of the pot represents our past traumas, our past experience, and each and every one of our stories. Obviously, it's painful, it hurts to talk about, but it's also what brings beauty in our paths. See, we live in a world that we idolize toughness, we idolize perfection. Social media teaches us to crop, edit ourselves, polish ourselves until we are untouchable. We call it Instagram-worthy posts. We want to make sure that we look good and show our strong side and not our weak side, because we're scared of the weak. But you see, the problem with armor is that it blocks connection. You can't hug someone with a shield on, nor can you be healed with your heart hidden. See, let's be real. How many of us have walked into a class one day, and said we're fine, we put on a smile, but in reality, we were dying on the inside. We were going through a lot. See, vulnerability is shown as weakness in our society, but in reality, it's strength. The psychologist Leon Susser put it this way, that vulnerability feels like weakness to us on the inside, but looks like courage from the outside. So in our times of trouble, in our weakest points, when we feel like we can't go anymore, we're facing our storms, they tend to be the times that others look up to us and admire our courage. I remember a time in my own life where I was going through a lot with my family, my parents. We didn't have the greatest relationship, and with my siblings too as well. I remember going into school every day, and it was hard to focus, balance school, my family, sports, and I couldn't handle it. I felt like that cracked pot. Every day I would come in, put on a mask, say I'm fine, do my work, but in reality I was dying on the inside. I was leaking. But then one day, I decided to speak up. I decided to let myself be seen. So I spoke to someone that I trusted, and I spoke my emotions. I spoke what I was going through. And that's the minute I began to heal. I felt better. I began to feel stronger, and I realized the true power of vulnerability in my life. See, I found that people didn't walk away. They actually came closer. They felt needed. And that's the biggest misconception with vulnerability today, that many people think that nobody really cares about what you're going through, nobody cares about your problems. But I bet you if you go right now through this building, and you try to look for someone that'll hear what you're going through, you'll find someone. There are people there that care because, like a study found, a 2022 Stanford study found, that people actually feel closer to us when we ask for help. They feel valued and needed. They feel helpful. Now, let's pause and think for a second. Who are those in your lives that you are closest to? Chances are they're not perfect, but they're honest. They let you in. They were honest with you. They struggled in front of you. They cried with you. They were there for you at your best and at your weakest. They opened up themselves to you. So if we open up ourselves and we don't keep ourselves hidden, then we'll begin to heal and we'll begin to get stronger than we were before. So I'm a big arts guy. I love music and arts. It's always been a big thing for those who may not know. But a few weeks ago, I was watching on YouTube, I was just watching some arts and stuff going on, and I found this ancient Japanese art actually. It's called kintsugi, and it really caught my attention. So it's basically just broken pottery that's fixed with gold. But what's interesting is that instead of hiding the cracks, they're highlighted with gold. So the idea is simple, that the pot is more beautiful for having been broken. So think about that. If the pot was never broken, would it have ever gotten to that beautiful phase that it's at right now? What if those cracks represent our weaknesses, our vulnerabilities? If we hide our vulnerabilities, if we hide our cracks, what we're going through, and we don't show them or speak them out, will we ever get to this form of beauty that we can possibly be? So I found it was very interesting, and I thought it was a great example of, what vulnerability can do to our lives, in our lives. So this is a psychological model by Charles that I found during my research. It's called the SAVI, or the Strength and Vulnerability Integration. So basically what it shows is that people who are at their strongest right now have learned to face and speak their vulnerabilities. It shows that, yes, they're at their strongest right now because they didn't keep their vulnerabilities and weakness hidden. They actually spoke them. They were honest about it. So they faced their storms, they faced their troubles, their hardships, but they learned to dance in that rain. But what does this mean? Well, you see this beach ball. I want you to imagine this. You're holding that beach ball and you're in water. Let's say you're at a pool or a lake, and you push it under the water and you keep it there. It takes force and energy, right, for it not to burst out and pop up in the surface. Well, let's say your finger slipped and the beach ball bursts up and is now at the water level. That's what it feels like when you keep your emotions hidden. But when you speak your emotions, when you say, I'm not okay, I need help, I'm not doing so well, then you release that pressure and you begin to breathe, you begin to heal. If we all open up ourselves and we're honest with each other, we'll begin to heal together. And that brings me to my last point. As Psychology Today proves, that revealing is healing. If I keep myself hidden, I'll stay the same person I am for my entire life. But if I put myself out there, even this TED Talk is kind of nerve-wracking. If I put myself out there and I speak what I'm going through, what I'm feeling, I allow myself to receive information from other people, and I put myself there in, let's say, the fire, and then I begin to be a new creature. So how do we practice this in our lives today? How do we put vulnerability and integrate it into our lives? Well, start small. You don't have to start big. I challenge you to find someone that you trust, that you're honest with. Speak to them, tell them what you're going through. If you're going through something right now, tell them what you're going through, what you're feeling. Journal your thoughts. Pray, meditate. You can cry if you have to. You don't have to post it on Instagram or social media, but because vulnerability is not about performance, it's just about presence. But be honest. You don't have to be that strong man all the time. So I know I said a lot, but if there's one thing I want you guys to get from this talk today, is that don't try to be perfect, don't try to act perfect. You don't always have to be the strong one. You don't have to try to balance everything on yourself. You have other people there who care about you. Be that cracked pot. Be that gold. water your path, and just wait to see what blooms. Thank you.